Hello, and welcome everybody to this virtual celebration of Dr. Andre E. Johnson's new book, No Future in This Country, The Prophetic Pessimism of Bishop Henry McNeil Turner. I can't wait for us to just delve deep into the ideas and what's going on with this book. But first, let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Johnson. Let me tell you a bit about him first. Dr. Andre E. Johnson is an associate professor of rhetoric and media studies in the Department of Communication and Film at the University of Memphis. He teaches classes in African American public address, rhetoric, race and religion, media studies, interracial communication, rhetoric and popular culture, and hip hop studies. Dr. Johnson also serves as the scholar in residence at the Benjamin L. Hooks Institute of Social Change at the University of Memphis. Dr. Johnson is currently collecting and editing the works of AME Church Bishop Henry McNeil Turner under the title, The Literary Archive of Henry McNeil Turner with Edwin Mellen Press. He has already published the first 6 volumes, and the 7th one is set for publication in 2021. Additionally, along with his academic titles, he currently serves as senior pastor of Gifts of Life Ministries, yay, G-Life, an inner city church built upon the servant leadership philosophy. Dr. Johnson is married to Lisa Jones Johnson, owner of For Peaceful Resolutions, a conflict resolution and mediation company. Dr. Johnson was born and raised in Memphis, Tennessee. And after graduation, he attended the University of Tennessee at Martin, where he received his Bachelor of Science degree in communication. He graduated from Memphis Theological Seminary, where he earned his Master of Divinity degree, and he completed a Doctor of Philosophy degree in communication at the University of Memphis. In addition to collecting the writings of Bishop Turner, Dr. Johnson is also the author of the national award-winning book, The Forgotten Prophet, Bishop Henry McNeil Turner and the African American Prophetic Tradition. This one right here. He is the editor of the Urban God Talk, Constructing a Hip-Hop Spirituality. He is the co-author, along with Amanda Nell Egger, of the national award-winning book, The Struggle Over Black Lives Matter and All Lives Matter. And of course, his latest book, which we're going to talk about this evening, No Future in This Country, The Prophetic Pessimism of Bishop Henry McNeil Turner, published with the University Press of Mississippi. He also serves as the curator and director of the Henry McNeil Turner Project, which is a digital archive dedicated to the writings and study of Bishop Turner. Dr. Johnson has presented academic papers at national, regional, and state conferences, winning awards at each level. Has published essays in the Howard Journal of Communications, Southern Communication Journal, Black Theology Journal, the New York Times, Journal of Contemporary Rhetoric, the Journal of American History, and Rhetoric and Public Affairs. He holds memberships in several national, regional, and state associations in the areas of communication, history, African American studies, and religious studies. So, this evening, we are going to focus and hone in on his groundbreaking work on Bishop Turner. Dr. Johnson maintains an eclectic research agenda. Ongoing research projects explore the nexus between rhetoric and theology, religion and politics, Black Lives Matter, the rhetoric of social movements, and the rhetorical history of African American public address. I give you all the prolific Reverend Dr. Andre E. Johnson.
Well, when you was saying all of those things, I was wondering who you were talking about. I thought I was supposed to be here. I didn't know we had another guest, but then you called out my name, and that's when I knew you were talking about me.
Yes.
First of all, can I just say thank you? Y'all show some love to Dr. Annette Matlock for hosting tonight. This is something, as I was explaining earlier in our worship experience with G-Life, this is something that we do each time that I am blessed enough to have a book published. The very first book talk I give is at Gifts of Life Ministries. And I went in a little bit about that today, talking about how much I love this church, how much the church means to me and Lisa. This church has seen me grow and develop into the person I am today. Helped me through 2 degrees, my Master's of Divinity and my PhD. And so it is only right, it is only fitting that I start the book launch right here at Gifts of Life Ministries. Now, I normally would do this, as you know, and then in the fellowship hall. Usually right after service, we'll have a nice meal. I will say a few words about the book, answer some questions, do some book signing, and that would be the event. And it would be a nice, powerful event. Take some pictures and things of that nature. But due to COVID and due to our circumstances that we find ourselves in, what we wanted to do is to still have a book launch, but I wanted Gifts of Life Ministries to still have that designation as the first site of the book launch. So I got my shirt on today. There we go, right here. And got the books back at the back and all of that. So if you are interested in a signed copy of the book right now, the book right now is $20. The press is running a special $20 right now. And you can contact me at AEJ762 at gmail.com. If you would just email me at that email address, I'll tell you how you can get you a signed copy. So AEJ762 at gmail.com. Somebody will put that in the comment section for us as we go on tonight. Again, I want to thank Gifts of Life Ministries for sponsoring this, allowing me an opportunity to talk about the book, to talk about my research with Bishop Turner. And thank you again, Annette, for hosting, asking questions. And I would just now turn it back over to you and allow you to just have your way.
All right. Well, one of the first questions that I wanted to ask you is, how did you come to want to research and spend your time learning about Bishop Henry McNeil Turner? So
Oh, wow.
what made you, want to come to that? Because it takes time to write these books and come to your perspective and conclusions that you've drawn. So as you answered that question, you can also tell us a little bit about that writing and research process.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's a great question. I have been working with Bishop Turner, I think, since around 2005. And I want to say 2005 because I think that was the year that I discovered one of his writings, which I soon discovered would be the September 3rd, 1868 speech on the eligibility of Negroes to seats in the Georgia legislature. And basically, the speech itself was definitely a prophetic one, but it was just a refutation about many of the white um, state members, legislative members, believed that Black folk could not hold office. And Turner offers this wonderful prophetic speech about I claim the rights of a man. And if I claim the rights of a man, I must stand and defend my rights. And he goes on with this beautiful, eloquent speech. And when I read that speech, I'm in my second or going on my third year of the PhD program, and I'm reading this speech, and it may even been 2004. So I'm reading this speech and I'm saying to myself, wow, I would love to know more about Henry McNeil Turner. I've never heard of him. Come to find out, he was a very important figure in the 19th and early 20th centuries. And big time in the AME church, big time just in African American history, church history, or just American history, period. And so I didn't know any of that at the time. I just had this one little piece of a speech. So, Annette, I knew I wanted to do something on prophetic rhetoric. That was going to be my research, my dissertation. But my one of my mentors and committee members, John Campbell, recommended that I find me a figure or a person to attach it to study this person for his or her prophetic rhetoric. So, and the usual suspects came to mind: King, Du Bois, maybe even Booker T. Washington, Garvey, people that we have heard and known about. And when I ran across Turner, I said, wait a minute, this is the guy I want to study. But it's the 19th century. I never heard of him. I asked a couple of people around the department. They never heard of him. Even rhetoricians who study 19th century rhetoric never heard of him. So I'm thinking, well, maybe this is just this one speech. And since he was a preacher and he spoke extemporaneously, so maybe there were no texts. There's nothing to be found about this guy. And all of a sudden, when I began to do the research, though, lo and behold, and I found so many writings from Bishop Turner that I'm like, it's sitting right here, and nobody has done any research. And up until that point, outside of one of your former professors, Mel Cummings, her 1972 dissertation on Bishop Turner in rhetoric, nobody else, and her article in 1992 in the Black Studies Journal, nobody had done anything in rhetoric or communication on Turner. A few historians have talked about Turner, but only one bio, Stephen Angle's 1992 bio from his dissertation in 1988 at Vanderbilt. I'm like, all these writings, I don't know now what I'm going to use for my dissertation. So I had to decide. So I began to start looking at the speeches, his extant speeches that we still had on record. And I began to do that work. but I always put in the back of my mind, and this is a long story I'm making real short, but I always had in the back of my mind that I was going to collect Turner's writings and make that public for everyone.
Okay.
And I'm doing that, as you mentioned, with some of the writings. And then now I got the speeches that I'm working on right now. Hopefully the speeches will be out late 2021 or early 2022. We're working on that with Mississippi Press as we speak right now. So that's how I found Turner, and I began to research on Turner. And yeah, I mean, and I keep finding stuff on Turner. I keep finding material, writings. I am a dogged footnote chaser. I love the footnotes. Thank you, all you historians, all you scholars who do good, solid footnoting. I will follow you down that rabbit hole. I will go and I footnote and I find these pieces of speeches, and I love to do. I love to put it all together, so much so that I can begin to trace Bishop Turner and his speaking engagements in a particular year, like 1866, his first 6 months when he was in Georgia. Where did he go? What did he say? How did he say? I mean, those are the type of things that really excite me. And you get a little bit about that in this book. But mostly you get a story of how someone who was pessimistic on the country finally still found a way not only to speak, but to speak boldly and prophetically, but also to be taken seriously. And that's what this story is about. I can talk a little bit more about it.
I want to interrupt you right
here.
Yeah,
sure.
Because you said something earlier about that 1868 speech in Georgia.
Yeah.
And considering where we are right now, can you draw any parallels to that speech, that time period, and what's happening right now tonight in Georgia?
Oh my God! Yeah, you got a debate going on right now, all right? And I'm looking at voter suppression in 2021. I mean 2020 and 2021 next year as well. In 1868, that's exactly what you were looking at. In 1870, that's exactly what you're looking at. I am now looking at some of Turner's political speeches, and the way that what he's fighting about and what he's arguing about resonates. One of the exercises in that I like to do in my classes, sometimes, especially my undergrad, I take a speech and all I do is just change out the identifying markers of a time period. So instead of Negro, I would change that to African American, and places and situations that if you read it, that was 19th century. It would not be contemporary. And I do that because I try to give an example of what I call rhetorical templates. And I say, now who gave this speech? And I list some people up. And people always say, oh, that sounds like King. That sounds like X. That sounds like a Marvin Gaye. And it's Turner. And they're like, wait a minute. You mean to tell me he was fighting about that stuff back then? The same thing that we're doing? Yeah, same thing. So that 1868 speech is important because not only is it one of the best speeches given in American history, really it is. And and you can just Google it. Just I Claim the Rights of a Man, Henry McNeil Turner, and they'll pop up. It's all over the internet now, but in pieces and different draft forms. But what this speech really speaks to is what we're going through right now. What does a real democracy look like? Turner is fighting for real democracy in 1868. And Reconstruction was a time that we could have really, it was our first attempt at a real multiracial, eventually multi-ethnic democracy. And if we would have done it right back then, maybe we would not be in the position that we are right now. Turner is arguing for authentic representation. And one of and part of that speech, he says, if a black man cannot hold, and he uses man, but he really means humankind. If a black person cannot hold the seat created and voted for by black people, then who can hold it? He's talking about representation democracy. He's talking about if your constituency vote for you, you should be able to go and serve that constituency. He's talking about turning the other cheek. It was Turner once he got elected and once they did the back and forth. He's on the Georgia State Constitutional Convention because as part of the rebel states, they had to write constitutions that not only accepted the 13th Amendment, but the 14th Amendment. And Turner is on that committee. And he is actually agreeing because he's believing at that time that America was ready to really participate in real democracy. So part of that is what? Forgiving your enemies. Those folk who rebelled. He did not want to put them in jail. He did not want them to lose their land. He said, no, let bygones be bygones. We can work together. And he will rue the day that he said that, and he will verbally publicly say that he was a little naive, and it was one of the worst mistakes that he ever made, because it was those same people that as soon as they got power, they voted him out, first of all, kicked him out illegally, and then by shotgun, and I'm not being hyperbolic when I say that, by shotgun in 1870, stole the election. So we're talking about the people who are trying to start coups, stealing elections, talking about elections are fake. That was going on in 1868 and 1870, and Bishop Turner is right in there.
So you talk about this this being a real democracy. What during that time with Bishop Turner and thinking about the time and women's role, how did Bishop Turner see women at that time? Did he have any womanist tendencies?
I knew you was going to ask that, you womanist. And I want to shout you out for the new book that's getting ready to be, that's going to drop for you. We're going to be doing this again probably next month. And I'm going to be the interviewer and you'll be the interviewee. You got this one wonderful collection coming out, and you bringing together some mighty, mighty powerful voices to talk about womanism. Mm-hmm. And I want to thank you for that. And it is on the Rhetoric, Race, and Religion book series. So I want to shout out that R3 book series as well. But yeah, Turner is, when people ask me this question, I frame it like this. Turner is as pro-woman as a Black preacher could be in the 19th century. And I'm always qualifying it because, you know, I mean, he still had its male tendencies. He still was a Black preacher. It still was a male club. It was still, you know, he still had his own hang-ups about household chores and duties and stuff like that. He believed that men should be married, that and if a man is 21, 22, 23 years old and not married by then, something is wrong. So he had these kind of traditional ways. Uh-huh. But as far as women in the public arena, one of the things when I give my talks on Turner and women, not only does he ordain Sarah Ann Hughes in 1885, ordination that the bishops, other bishops rescinded, not only does he promote verbally women right to preach and think that there's nothing wrong with that. The one thing that Turner, if you ask me one thing that Turner did within his role as a preacher first, and then bishop, and then senior bishop of the AME Church, he publicly, and this is womanist to its core, he publicly shouts out and supports women. And that was radical in the 19th century. For any man, forget Black preacher man, but any man to do. So for instance, in 1865, in the eulogy that he wrote for Miss Mary, I want to say, yeah, Mary Turner, that that he talks about how she helped him with his sermons, made them better, critiqued his grammar. He cringed every time she came up after service because he knew that she was having a critique where everybody would say, "Good job, Reverend, good job." She would come up, "Well, you messed up here and you didn't use that right verb," but it made him a better preacher. And he talks about that publicly. It wasn't private. When he used to own his newspapers, he put women in charge when he took his trips to Africa or took his trips across country, working for the church and being bishop of his districts. He, in 1868, during this same time period, he is doing Reconstruction. He's presenting a bill on the Georgia House floor for women and their right to vote in 1868. Now, I never did get out of committee, but he offered that because of his belief, not only in democracy, but also the belief that he really radically believed that women and men are equal and both have gifts from God. He supported Hallie Quinn in 1900 for the Secretary of Education in the AME Church when she was running for Secretary of Education. Wrote a letter back to her that we have on record, and then publicly supported her candidacy in the Voice of Mission newspaper. I can go to going on and on with these kind of examples that Turner, when he started his lyceum, where most lyceums, well, some did too, but most lyceums did not admit women as debaters or speakers. Turner and his creation of his lyceum at Israel AME Church in 1863 not only invited women, but lauded women and their debating skills and their speaking skills. So, like I said, I can go on and talking about the different times that Turner publicly, not just privately, not just, behind closed doors, publicly went out and supported women and said wonderful and powerful things about them.
As I listen to you talk about this and the amount of time and energy, I mean, literally, if you starting this in 04, 05, that is more than a decade of work.
Yeah,
looking at the bishop. And so, what sort of pilgrimage was this for you?
Right. Well, I am also a pastor in Gifts of Life Ministries. Again, shout out to G Life, and I'm a scholar, and I see Turner as a scholar pastor. And even though Turner did not have a formal education, he is definitely within, I do agree with Dr. Hetty V. Williams, as she puts Turner in the Black intellectual tradition. And I totally agree with that. Turner is self-taught. He taught himself not only how to read and write English, but also how to read and write Hebrew, Greek, and Latin. I'm like I mentioned earlier, I'm going through his speeches and I find myself Googling the Latin phrases to make sure to understand what Turner was trying to say at that time. But the pilgrimage for me is seeing someone in the 19th century doing the things that he did, because if he was living today, he would be a public intellectual. He would definitely have a column somewhere. He would be a blogger. He would be writing for somebody because he wrote extensive. He wrote, it's so much. I was just so surprised to find that much material. And these are not just private papers. I wish if somebody's out there that have some private correspondence from Bishop Turner, please contact me. I'm not even talking about that, because we have not found any of that yet. I'm talking about just the public stuff in the newspapers, the letters to the editor, the letters to others that, that he got into debates with, so much so. And I see in myself a little bit of Turner, someone who is both in the public arena, but also in the church, in the community, leading people in the community, being a thought leader at times, but also being faithful to his faith, and really at times, at times struggling with his faith. And so when times get tough right now for me, and when I began to think about some of the stuff that that's going on right now in the world, the elections and suppression of votes and COVID, and I will go back and read some Bishop Turner and meditate on that, because he is dealing with some of the same issues, and to see him working it out from his writings, just so powerful to me. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to write this book. It's one of the reasons why I want to collect his writings. I want the world to know. I want other people to study him. I want other people to write about him. It's one of the reasons why, until I retire or just stop writing, or whatever else, the Lord calls me home, I am going to be working on Bishop Henry McNeil Turner, on top of all the other things that I feel called to do.
So that leads me to the next question I have in mind for you is, what was the most exciting thing you learned about the bishop?
I learned again about his role and his belief in women and the support of women. But you know, one of the big things, including his belief in women and his support of women, was his ideas about race and racism. I mean, and I can see why we will say this, that W.E.B. Du Bois is like the parent of racial identity studies, or where we get notions of race from. He is a Harvard trained PhD, and he wrote extensively. He is a scholar. I get it. But Turner is actually working on some of this stuff even before Du Bois. Turner that began to understand that what's really at play wasn't prejudice. It wasn't just like a bias situation toward African Americans. It was race. And Turner is the first one that begins to start thinking in the ways that we're thinking today about anti-Blackness. He doesn't use the term anti-Black, but he's talking about that it is because there is an issue. He never really says, because I'm Black or because we are Black. It's really, he says, they have an issue. You know, he was writing to Booker T. Washington in the papers, of course, because they used to debate all the time in papers. He's writing, he says, Mr. Washington want white folk to leave us alone. He said, that's an impossibility. White folk cannot leave Black folk alone. Why? Because it is just, he will argue that it was just who they were in relationship to Black folk. And he said, just look at history. And he always used to go back to history. So Turner is doing that work. Also, Turner is talking about Blackness and anti-Blackness as relates to white folk. As it relates, to Black folk. He's talking about anti-Blackness as it relates to Black folk, meaning that, and this is one of the reasons why he talked about immigration as well, too. This is one of the reasons why he wanted to somehow get away from the degrading language that Black folk were around here in America, because that language, he argued, was really hurting Black folk, because it had Black folk believing that they were nothing and nobody. And he says, as long as you believe that, you're going to pass that down to your children ad infinitum, ad nauseum. It's just going to keep on. Degradation begets degradation. And you are going to start to feel inferior, and nobody will have to tell you that you're inferior because you will start to think that. Now, we know this in the 20th century, the Kenneth Clark and Dr. Clark's doll test. And we know this from Carter G. Woodson's famous thing in the Miseducation of the Negro, that you don't have to worry about Negroes going in a front door. And if it was not a back door, they'll cut a hole and make a back door and all of that. This is the stuff that Turner is talking about in 1880, 1885, 1890. So as much as he talked about immigration, and when he realized that that's not going to happen on the scale that he wanted to happen, he begins to unpack what it means, what does it mean to say that a person is anti-Black or racist? And of course, that led into his theology. And that's why he comes a full circle in 1895 to proudly and boldly proclaim God as a Negro, because no one can worship a God that person does not believe that he or she does not look like a God, looks like God. And as long as you think that God doesn't look like you and that God is against you, you will always be in an inferior position. And so those are some of the things that really just excite me and surprised me that Turner was doing that when that back then.
And that brings me to I was looking at some of the titles of the book chapters, and then and looking at those chapters, and you definitely hit on chapter 2, worship a God who is Negro. But the first chapter, an abominable conclave of Negro hating demons.
Yeah.
You need to tell us a little bit more about
that. Okay. I would love to.
We need to hear about this.
Oh man. Listen, I want to let me see if I can just pull this up right quick, cause I thought I had this up already. But I think I closed out the folder here.
Okay.
Yeah, no. I want to read something from that chapter, actually. Yeah, I just love that phrase. I'm sorry, I just love that phrase. An abominable conclave of Negro hating demons. And basically, this is the chapter in which I talk about Turner's just disgust at the United States Supreme Court. If you think, before I read it, listen, y'all. If you think that the Supreme Court is a problem right now, if you think that the Supreme Court is making some crazy decisions today, my God, Reconstruction era, post-Reconstruction era, the Supreme Court is setting up what we thought that we fought against in the 50s and 60s, but now it is coming right on back. And Turner would be livid. People always ask him, what would Turner think about today? He would be livid at the Supreme Court, just like he was in his day, because the Supreme Court is finding itself in just finding itself not being useful at all as it relates to Black folks. So this is actually the piece, Annette, that I wanted to read just a little bit. So if everybody can just bear with me and just hear this, and it's on page 39 of the book. And so if you already got the book, you can follow along. But
I had the privilege of doing the index for the book.
That's right. Yes, you did.
So, yeah,
and that's why the index is so, listen, y'all, the index is so tight, y'all. I mean, it is tight. So if you want to find anything in the book, you need to thank Dr. Annette Matlock, because she did a wonderful job in that index. Page 39. While others continue to call for calm and understanding of the Plessy decision, Turner continued his all-out assault. In an editorial published 1 month after what he called the infamous decision, Turner did not withhold his disappointment. Turner called the court an abominable conclave of Negro-hating demons, with one exception, who, quote, issued another decree that colored men and women must be driven into Jim Crow cars whenever it suits the whim of any white community. He further noticed the unfairness of such a policy when he lamented that Blacks, though regulated to the Jim Crow car, still had to, quote, pay as much for a seat in those hog pens as the white people pay in cars of ease and luxury. And if we just stop just for a moment,
Right
and
there.
I know there is a debate talking about reparation, we could talk about how unfair it was for Black people to get second, third, fourth hand service, even backdoor service, but yet still pay full price.
Premium prices.
My God, I could just stop right there, but let me just go on. The next paragraph, next Turner shifted and he praised on the earlier one exception, John Harlan, whom he called the only righteous and just man associated with that body. However, his focus on Harlan did not last long, as he turned his attention back to the other justices who had caused the court to be a stench in the nostrils of the civilized world. Further, if what he had said earlier did not resonate with his readers, Turner wrote, and here's the quote, "We beg the devil's pardon, however, for comparing the members of the Supreme Court to him. For let it be said that to the credit of the devil, he has never been known to degrade himself as to be guilty of any such discrimination as the so-called Supreme Court, who is composed of some second and third-handed lawyers who were too ignorant and worthless to make a decent living, until by some trick or maneuver, they succeed in beguiling the president to appoint them to a place on the Supreme Bench, simply because they had a white face and not for any merit possessed. For there is not a Negro on the sugarcane farms of Louisiana or the rice-grown swamps of South Carolina who is not equal to any member of the Supreme Court, Justice Harlan accepted." He closed his editorial in disgust. "Well," he wrote, "let the Black man grin and endure and possess his soul in patience and wait for a better day." He suggested that members of the Supreme Court would all be in hell in a dozen or more years, and that furthermore, their children's children would be ashamed to own them as their ancestors. Ending his editorial, he foresaw a day when Negro jurists would sit upon the same bench they are now disgracing and render righteous decisions. And it goes on, but you can just get a feel just off that on page 39 there, that Bishop Turner is really just frustrated, and that's not even a strong enough word, with the Supreme Court. One more that I want to just lift up. He says that in the Cleveland Gazette, Turner continued to lament and excoriate the Plessy decision. Turner started his letter by writing, "I have absolutely no interest in the issues of this bloody lynching nation with all its brutal Supreme Court in Washington, D.C., issuing decisions against my race, which would never dream of in hell." He implicated both political parties, Democrat and Republican, and wrote that neither of them care anything about the Negro because in Turner's estimation, neither party in Congress ever opened their mouths about the way his race is butchered, shot, and burnt without law or civil rule. So it is in 1896 that Turner begins this visceral campaign against the Supreme Court, which never lets up until this dying day. He is 1906, 1907, he is still critiquing the Supreme Court. So he began to understand the Supreme Court of that day and how some of the decisions were made. And you got to remember, the Plessy decision just shaped American jurisprudence and American way of life for almost 60 years until 1954. I mean, think about that. And think about the decisions that are being made today. That's what Turner was trying to get folk to understand back then. And many of the Black leaders were saying, well, it's not going to be as bad. You know, it's separate but equal, and we're going to be able to work it out and make it work. And Turner saying, no, do you know what's going to happen now? And as soon as that judgment came down, states, especially in the South, and just really all over the country, but especially in the South, starting with Mississippi, began to pass laws, separate but equal laws, and it not only stayed with trains and public transportation, but it got into voting, and it got into schools, and it got into a whole lot of different areas, and it just became who we were as a country. And we need to understand that, and Turner helps us out there.
And some of the, in some of our school and teaching, particularly for Black culture, African American culture, we talk about Sankofa. Looking and
right.
thinking about the education of our millennials and the way that they're protesting. I would say that they have a lot to learn from Turner, because what he's doing is the work that they're doing right now. So tell me your thoughts on that, because you're out there, in the streets marching with our young people. Yeah, you're there, you're with them.
Yeah.
And they're starting about the the same ages as our civil rights legends.
Yes. Yeah, true. Well, no. I mean, that's the other thing. No, that's the other thing that we pick up from Turner. Turner was not only a bishop or a church leader or a pastor that stayed in the church. Turner is out in the public. Turner is on the highways and byways, and he's on horseback. He's going to preach sometimes 4, 5, 6 times a day. Turner talks about his run-ins with the KKK, how he had to hide in a log one time, how he hid in a tree the other time, how another time people were looking for a man named Turner, and he knew it was him. He joined the group and said, yeah, let's go find him. And he's covering his face up, and he's part of the group, so that when they got into the woods, he can just kind of drift off and escape. So Turner is not only a preacher that is concerned about right theology and orthodoxy, he's about praxis. He's out there. He's doing the stuff that we see. We saw our civil rights leaders do, of course, in the 60s, and what BLM and others are doing today. He's doing that stuff, so much so. And you know that you're doing something, sometimes you know that you're doing something that's really bothering people when folk are trying to really get at you or come after you. And Turner had a whole lot of that. And how do we find this out? His testimony to the United States Congress when they came to Georgia and asked people about the KKK and about those events there. So, Turner is both community, he's talking about building, he's talking about moving forward, he's talking about, and think about this for a moment. I'm thinking about Turner community organizing, community building. And I tell people this because on the one hand, you can make an argument that his rhetoric about immigration failed because Black folk did not immigrate in huge amounts to Africa. And I say, okay, and I put this in the book, this is in chapter 5. And I talk about, you can say that. However, if we re-examine Turner's rhetoric about immigration, he begins to understand that it was cost prohibitive for many African Americans to get to Africa because trying to get a ship, raising the money, get the ship, and then finding good and faithful folk that would do right by the money, because there was a lot of scams going on during that time. All of that was going to be problematic. But think about it this way: Turner is actually calling for the same thing that Gandhi actually called for when he helped India get to their independence. He's talking about, do not participate in your own oppression. Mm-hmm. So you got a couple of things you can do. You can try to integrate, which is never going to happen because you got separate but equal. Social equality is dead in this country. So that's out. You can assimilate and just try to adopt and try to be the best you can be, but you're not going to be too much of anything. Or you can just acquiesce, and then that's not good because you're starting to feel inferior yourself if you just, acquiesce to what people are saying about you. But what if you just withhold your labor and move? Well, so I asked this question: what would this country look like if 1 million African Americans in 1890 would have just left on ships going to Africa? And then what would Africa look like today? Mm-hmm. We know that folk were scared of that because we do know that the former enslavers, now planters, landowners, begin to have these contracts that say that you can't leave until you pay back all of your sharecropping dues or dollars or whatever. And you know that you never got out of debt because they always cooked the book. So you were there forever, working. And so what happened, and by the way, Turner did get many more folk to go to Africa than Garvey or anybody else ever did, but that's a whole nother talk. But what he did do is to do what Robert Turrell says that Malcolm X was attempting to do, this whole notion of symbolic emancipation. Mm-hmm. He put the idea into Black folks' spirits, heads, and hearts that, you know what, we can do this. We can move. I might not have enough money to get to Africa, but if I'm in Memphis, maybe I can make it to St. Louis. Mm-hmm. Maybe I can make it to Chicago. And if I'm in St. Louis, maybe I can go out west a little bit further, past Kansas City. Maybe I can go somewhere better than the South. And we know that there were great migrations, 1 and 2, people leaving, Black folk leaving the South. Mm-hmm. And so the point is, maybe Turner did do enough to get people to think, yeah, I can try to create my own livelihood, my own agency. Now, we know the rest of that story. When you got up to the places that you try to get to, some of the same Jim Crow and Jane Crow was waiting on you there when you left. Mm-hmm. But at least you were taking agency. You were taking, stepping out there and doing it because you believed that you could. Because there was a belief that Black folks just did not think that they could do a whole lot without white folks' help. And Turner was totally against that.
So as we come to the close of our hour, mm-hmm. and I'm going to say, at this price, this is an excellent book to add to your library, to actually read and not to just sit there, but read and take some lessons from that can be applied for today, right now. Mm-hmm. But as we wrap this up, what are some of your closing thoughts that you want, action steps for people that are listening and viewing right now?
Well, first of all, you just talked about the book. Right now, the book is $20, and you can go to aej762@gmail.com if you want to know how to get a signed copy of that book. Or you can just Google No Future in This Country, and you go to the University of Mississippi Press website. You can order it there. And that sale will be going on until the 15th. So please take advantage of that. but what I want to leave people with is, let me just, in a nutshell, just close out on talking a little bit about the chapters. You mentioned chapter 1, abominable conclave of Negro hating demons. Chapter 2 is titled Negroes Should Worship a God Who is Negro. I talk about Turner's theology and his growing theology of Blackness in that chapter. Third chapter was an unholy war of conquest, Turner and the creation of an anti-war protester. For a lot of people who didn't know this, Turner was the first African-American chaplain in the armed forces when he was appointed by Lincoln as a chaplain for the United States Colored Troops back in 1863. And for a person who wrote so eloquently about the bravery of African Americans during the Civil War, during the Spanish-American War and of 1898, and the war that went on into 1900, he became anti-war. And I talk about that because he began to wonder out aloud, why would people fight for a country that did not respect them and did not show any kind of love back to them? The fourth chapter, McKinley, the God of Food Negroes, Turner in the presidential election in 1900. Turner did the unthinkable in 1900, and that he voted and supported the Democratic nominee, William Jennings Bryan. You know, back then, Black folk were loyal to the Republican Party because that was the party of Lincoln, the party that freed them. And Turner was one of its biggest supporters, but Turner got tired of Republicans taking Black folk for granted and not standing up. And he thought that he would switch allegiances. He never joined the Democratic Party, but he wanted to make a statement, and I talk about that. Chapter 5 is the rhetoric of immigration, the salvation of the Negro. We talked a little bit about that. And then another one of my favorite chapters, Hell is an Improvement so far as the Negro is concerned. And these are quotes, by the way, from Turner and the Damning of America. So Jeremiah Wright is back in the news these days, and because of Obama's book, of course, and he's back in the news right now. So when I think about the damning of America, I think about Bishop Turner. So if you think Jeremiah Wright is in the long tradition of the Black prophetic tradition, because Turner was damning America in 1905 and 1906, so much so that President Roosevelt was thinking about having him brought up on treason charges until his good friend and sometimes foe, Booker T. Washington, interceded on the behalf of Turner and got Roosevelt to step down a little bit. But Turner didn't back down. He kept on dishing it out. So, and then the last conclusion is I try to put Turner in today's parlance. So I tell you what, Annette, I'm looking here. We have some questions.
Okay, let's go.
I tell you what we can do if, we can just look at some of these questions here that was in the chat. I will try to answer, and then we can get on out of here. It's 7 o'clock now. I think we had a buffer time at 7:30, so we can finish before then. But Brother James Morgan, who is serving on the Henry McNeil Turner Project as one of the advisory board members. Thank you, Brother Morgan. You've been a big proponent of my work and of Bishop Turner. Brother Morgan is also a historian in his own right, doing some marvelous work about the Masonic lodges and information there and history there. And it was him that brought my attention to Turner's role in Masonry. And a lot of the procedures and a lot of the Robert Rules of Order parliamentary procedures and stuff that Turner employs with the AME Church, as well as with the State House in Georgia and his role in the Republican Party early on, he learns from being a Prince Hall Mason. So that's James Morgan. So glad that he's on. He says, I would like to know how writing this book differed from the first book on Turner. Good question. First book on Turner that's basically my dissertation, kind of dressed up in book form. So the stuff that I left out of my dissertation because my advisors and my committee members wanted me to focus on rhetorical criticism and the analysis of the speeches, I left that in there, but all of the background stuff that you read in The Forgotten Prophet, that's the stuff that I left out of my dissertation. And I just reintroduced that and shaped it and try to tell a story like I did in this book here. So each chapter kind of leads to the next chapter. And some of the best history writers tell wonderful stories. So I'm trying to emulate that as well. With this book, it's a follow-up. I stopped The Forgotten Prophet in 1895, and I stopped because that was for me in the dissertation, but it was also me knowing that I had a second book coming that I wanted to pick up in 1896 to its death in 1915. And instead of a rhetorical criticism book, like the first book, the second book is more of a rhetorical history, where I foreground Turner's voice. It is not a history in the traditional history way, and it's not rhetoric in a traditional rhetoric way. So I'm trying to actually, and I'm glad you asked this question, because I am trying to merge both rhetoric and history together in something we call a rhetorical history, where I am foregrounding not necessarily context is in it, but I'm foregrounding Turner's voice in response to the context in which he finds himself in. So if you look at the chapters, as I just went over them again, Plessy versus Ferguson, God is a Negro, Spanish-American War, the election of 1900, his rhetoric of immigration, and his damning of America, all are contextually grounded in what was going on. His voice is contextually grounded in what was going on at that particular time. And I hope that comes across when you read the book and when you go from chapter to chapter. I wanted you to be saying, wow, I got to stop reading this in chapter 2, but I need to now go to chapter 3 because Johnson has led me to something in chapter 3 that I want to read. So, so that's my hope and my vision about this. And each chapter is written in what I best describe as flashback, in a flashback, meaning that we'll start at the present and then I take you back and I give you context and history leading up to the change in which Turner finds himself in. So, for instance, a great example is chapter 3, when he is anti-war. He hadn't always been anti-war. He was supportive of the Civil War. At first he wasn't, but then once he got in it, he was very supportive, and he thought that, the military was a good way for people to establish what he would call manhood or personhood status and all of that. But in 1898, when America declares war on Spain and Cuba and Philippines and all of that, he's like, this is a war of imperialism. This is not anything to do with freedom, and I'm totally against that. And I'm totally against it because it doesn't matter what Black folk do now. You're still not going to treat Black folk right. So basically what I was trying to do is give you a history leading you up to that present moment, and then talk about how Turner talked about that moment, and then lead you to the next chapter. Um, let's see here. And there was another, and there may be some other questions on other feeds and stuff, and we can get to them. Oh, yes, yes. So do you have any closing questions, Dr. Matlock, or any questions on your feed?
I don't see any questions on
Okay,
over here.
good.
Yeah.
Well,
But
all
I'm
right, then.
looking at your book, The Forgotten Prophet. I'm looking at how the chapters are named here, and chapter 1 is called Let Bygones Be Bygones.
Right, yeah.
And the celebratory prophecy. and then it closes with chapter 4, No Future of the Negro, Turner's pessimistic prophecy.
Right.
So you have it laid out here with it being celebratory, and then
yeah.
And then
yeah, I mean that's the dissertation, right? That was my contribution to the field. Yay, my contribution. I'm talking about prophetic rhetoric, the Black prophetic tradition, moving from optimistic to pessimistic. What I was trying to do in that first book is to demonstrate how can somebody go from let bygones be bygones, let us be brothers and sisters and work together, to there is no future, no man of future in this country for the Negro. How do you get that point? And that's what I try to do, try to show the rhetorical trajectory of Turner's work. And then I get to this book, I pick right up on 1895. I think in the introduction, I talk about that people can look at these two books as a volume 1, volume 2. Even though they come out at different times with different presses and all of that, I made the connection that we pick up on 1896. So it is the sequel, if you will, to the Forgotten Prophet. And I don't have any copies other than this one copy that you see behind me of the Forgotten Prophet. But I have been asked now since this other book, and you know what? I might need to get me some more copies of the Forgotten Prophet. Look at that. Look at that. Yes, 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 I see it. The Forgotten Prophet. I'll get me another copy of the Forgotten Prophet or some more copies. But no, this has been wonderful. Thank you for allowing me to talk a little bit about the book. I know the next book talk I'm going to give is on Tuesday at 7 o'clock, if I'm not mistaken, Central Time. Memphis Theological Seminary has agreed to host. And I have an opportunity next week to do a third book talk. Hasn't been confirmed yet, but I do want to extend an invitation. This is the first one, and we are so thankful for this. Again, Gifts of Life Ministries, this opportunity to share. But if you're listening to me, let me put my preacher voice on for a moment, Dr. Madlock. If you're under the sound of my voice, hallelujah. If you can hear me, if you would like to host a book talk like this, just a Zoom, a virtual book talk, reach out to me. I'm going to be putting together a book talk starting in January. I think, like I said, we'll do one on Tuesday, and then I may be able to do one next week. But after that, we're going to pick back up in January. And I will be looking to do more of these talks. And we can just talk about anything centered around Bishop Henry McNeil Turner, the writing process, the research process, a chapter of the book. I read a portion of the book, but I can actually do presentation if people wanted me to do that. So, I mean, it is just up to the person. So if you are interested, let me know. Hit me up, inbox me, email me at aejohnson762@gmail.com. Let me know if you are interested in hosting a book talk. I hope you are, because this is a great book. And right now it is on sale, $20 on sale right now for only $20. Can I say that again? $20, only $20 until December the 15th. The press University Press of Mississippi has been wonderful. And if you're looking to get something published, I would highly recommend reaching out to Emily and her crew at the University of Mississippi Press. I'll shout them out right now for that as well. So that's it from me.
All right, thank you. And thank you everyone for participating with us. No Future in This Country, The Prophetic Pessimism of Bishop Henry McNeil Turner by Reverend Dr. Andre E. Johnson. There is so much information held within the pages of that book and within his ginormous brain that you will have to have another book talk to just to get everything out of there. So again, thank you so much for being with us. Sister Circle Writers, we enjoyed being a part of this book launch, and we hope to see you real soon. Thank you, everybody.